Thank you. Thanks for coming. I'm glad I'm here because I can say things about Dennis that he'd be too modest to tell you himself. Dennis has achieved an enormous amount for such a young artist. He's got the National Gallery of Australia have over 20 of his works. He has work in the Queensland Art Gallery, which you're aware of, all the other state galleries, many of the Australian regional galleries. He's in many university collections. He has just had work acquired recently by the British Museum. He also has work in the Victorian Albert Museum, work in the Museum of Natural History in Lyon, and also work in other important collections. He has recently had solo shows in Paris and London. He has 2 exhibitions at the moment touring Australia. They will show in all capital cities and in many regional centres. So, you know, Dennis is has in the recent years come a long way. He's just completed his Masters of Visual Art at Griffith University, where he attained a high distinction, which is a great achievement for someone like Dennis. Dennis?
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Bardo Island in the Torres Strait, and before I speak again, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this area, the Aboriginal people of this area. I think there's 2 tribes, Jagara and also the Turrbal people. Well, I'm from Bardo Island in the Torres Strait. If those who don't know where Torres Strait is, it's situated between Papua New Guinea and the tip of Australia, Cape York. And Torres Strait is divided into 3 groups. Western Torres Strait, where I come from, in language is called Kalalagal. Central Torres Strait is called Kulkalgal. And the Eastern Torres Strait, which is the Miriam people, where Mabo comes from. My stories I do is mainly lino printing and etchings. And they are traditional stories, and I based it on 3 subjects. The first, I'm kind of recording them. The first one is I record the constellations, the traditional stories, and plants and medicines. So most of my works are based on those type of stories. Yeah. Yeah. For example, I will talk about one of my works here. The constellations in language is called Tituil. They were used for journey, traveling from Torres Strait by canoe to Papua New Guinea for trading, and also trading on the Cape York with the Aborigines. And stars were very important. They associate with the currents, and the markings. The canoes have to kind of follow in that direction to reach the destination where they wanted to trade. This particular constellation I want to talk about, the title is called Baidam. It's a 7-star shark, and it's from Torres Strait. It's seen up to the north of Papua New Guinea, and in this work, this is the nose of the shark and the body here, and this is the top dorsal fin, and that's the tail here. This particular star appears February, and it comes up on the horizon. Those 2 stars, this one and this one here, they come up about 7, 8 o'clock. And then about 10, 11 o'clock, you can just still see these 2 stars. And then about midnight, they kind of go down the horizon. You don't see them after midnight. That's during February, March, April. Then these other stars started to join, appearing from the horizon. About February, March, April, May, the old shark comes up about 10 o'clock, about in May. The old shark is up, is standing up. In language, it's called Bupurun Sika, Sarzan Sika, mean standing up upright on its nose. That time in the Torres Strait, the patterns on the top section of my work here, it represents the wind, which is called Sager Gub. Through Torres Strait, this very aggressive, strong wind blows through there, and the shark kind of tells us about that wind will be on till about June, July. The wind kind of drops, and the shark, it rotates. About June, July, how we see the shark now, it comes up like that, 7 o'clock again, and about 10 o'clock, it's all across the horizon, straight. That time, in this pattern represents that same time. And that's, this pattern represents when the shark, it forms in that angle, we call it Sibuin Sika. And it's a calm time in the Torres Strait. And sometimes when you look out to the sea, you can see like a grease forms on top of the surface of the sea. In our language, we interpret the shark liver as melted on the surface of the sea. And it's called Baidamau Eid. And it is also a dangerous time. Mainly the elders and uncles warn the parents to tell the children not to swim out far away from the beach because it's high tide, and also it's a very calm weather. It's tempting to swim out on the salt water. And it's when the sharks, they are mating, that's a mating season for the sharks, and they do get very aggressive, especially the tiger shark. And also the turtles, they meet, mating season for turtles and other bush plants and medicines. They appear that time in the bush. And people, like especially the elders, they go and do their medicines on that time. That's the only time the plant comes out of the ground. Other time, the plant kind of disappears. It stays in the ground. Then about June, July, August, the shark stays across like that. Then October, November, and December, the shark then, that time at 7 o'clock, instead of the nose comes up first, or this fin, the tail appears first. The shark is now pointing down. Then 10 o'clock, about 10 o'clock, about November and October, November, the shark, it points down. The tail is upright and the nose is down. In language, that's called Bupurun Sika, standing on its nose. And the patterns down here, it represents the monsoon. It's the monsoon time now. And in December, mid-December, the shark star, it doesn't come out anymore because mainly at night, the clouds, monsoon clouds cover it until next year, February, the shark appears again at that time. So it rotates 3 times during the year. And this is what the story is based on. Thank you.
Dennis, it might be interesting to hear how you go about obtaining these stories. What's the process and the protocol? These stories, and also the myths and legends stories like Ciceri?
Yeah, when my early days, when I first started carving, I couldn't do the important stories or the sacred stories because I wasn't experienced. Also, I was just trying, I wasn't experienced. It until 5 years later, 6 years. Then I started asking the elders that I was confident of doing the like some of the sacred stories that you have to be an experienced person to handle these kind of stories. And there are also protocols that we follow where we speak to the ancestors to allow us to do that story. And then the elders, they allowed me to do it until today, this time of my age. I can do these stories. But 5, when I was first starting, I wasn't allowed to do them.
Dennis, you've also told me that you have an involvement with your ancestors and the spirit people when you work on your lino blocks and etching plates.
Yeah, before time, when the artist, or we don't have the word for art in our language, the artist, they go into the bush, and that's where they carve some the artifacts or some ceremonial thing, crafts. They had to do them in the bush. And before they cut any trees or any bush materials, they had to speak to them. And it was just the rituals they had to perform. And yeah, they mainly did it away from the women and the children from the village. So it was only done in the bush. And for me now this time, I was also told to talk to my lino blocks before I begin any sacred stories, that I had to speak to my ancestors that I was doing them in this kind of form of lino printing. And so I do follow, I still practice that ritual, which I am also happy with that ritual. And it turns out it gives me good inspiration. And I also mainly do this work during at night, where I get a lot of visitors from the spirit world. And I know that they were my ancestors. And I don't get scared about them. And you know, I feel great when they're around because they give me inspirations. Yeah.
And some of your inspiration also comes to you in dreams.
Yes, some of the inspiration. Yeah, I have dreams sometimes, and like I have a lot of stories and to record through my work, and sometimes, like I do, in my dreams, I picture the characters, mainly in black and white. I see a lot of shadows in my dreams, and I try to capture that into my work, what I see in my dreams. Yeah.
It's interesting in Dennis's work. The Torres Strait Islander culture was passed, up until recently, was passed down in orally and in dance. So as you can imagine, no one knew what the spirit people or the characters that Dennis shows in his work look like. How did you work out a way of depicting them, visualizing them?
Yeah, the spirits, like they are quite sensitive. Like some of them, like we call them, we have different language for them, and the other common one we use is called maril, which is the spirits, just normal ones we might see in our dreams, or we see something that's moving at night. We always say that's a mari, which is a spirit. Yeah, I kind of it is a sensitive area. Also I am very careful how I do them, and I do talk to them. And sometimes when I try to do them, I can't do them, so I don't do them if they won't allow me. When my body doesn't feel well, so I don't carve them. Yeah, they do associate like with my work a lot.
Dennis has pioneered these large-scale works. The Ciceri work is encyclopedic. It tells a story which, if told orally, can go on for hours. But Dennis has encapsulated all the elements of the story.
Yeah. some of the stories, like you say, you can sit for 5, 6 hours. The old people can talk, and when you ask one question, that is going to answer the question for another hour. So it's up to you to kind of, and yeah, some of our stories, they can go for hours, and that's why on Cesare, which is one of my lino blocks just on this corner here, and that's where it's a very long story, and that's when I first wanting to do a bigger lino because of there's so much is happening in the same story, and so much, yeah, there's a lot of characters, and yeah, Cesare is one of the longest story. Besides this, there's another one I'm also doing. Is a 6-meter lino, which I'm almost completed on that one. It's another rainbow story, which can go for 7 hours when the story is told on that one.
It's interesting. Dennis and people of his age, it's like a pivotal point in Torres Strait Islander culture. Dennis, as a young boy, was brought up in Bardu and without electricity. So there was no television or other electronic distractions. A lot of, well, the entertainment was really listening to his family and the older people telling these stories. And this is why he's got such a strong link with his culture.
Yeah, yeah. We got our electricity on the Torres Strait on my island. They put it on in the 1990, and before that, the government used to promise us that they'll put it on before that, like during 1980s. But it never happened until 1990. But thinking back, it was good for me to that time when there was no electricity on the island. When the sun kind of goes down, we had mainly only storytelling will kind of put us to sleep when I was like young, and that was the only good time. Like we sit around our grandfather or uncle, and he'll tell us the story. By the time 8 o'clock or before 8 o'clock, we'll be asleep. Whereas today, that age, they can walk around till the morning because there's electricity on and they listen to music, and you won't see any young children sit around with their uncles or granddad listening to stories. And I'm really lucky I grew up in that time. But our elders are still there and they still have that knowledge. It's up to us to go up to them and ask them about this information. Yeah.
Another legacy of Dennis's boyhood was his learning to carve, and that skill has translated into the incredibly delicate and intricate linos and etchings that he's currently producing.
Well, first I kind of draw the characters, and then I carve around it with this. It's a speedball cutting tool. I get it from any art shop, and you can get like size 1 to size 5, and it's up to you which size you like to use. And where you carve is where the white areas are, so it doesn't create the black lines. So it's up to you to put your characters. So for me, I draw my characters. I draw my characters out, then I just carve around them. Then before I go into printing it, like apply the ink onto the lino with the roller, and using oil-based ink, and then put the paper on top, and then taking it to the printing press. And yeah, basically that's what I do. Yes, no. Also, recently, I have a printer up in Cairns. I carve the lino because I've got so much work. I can't catch up on printing my work, and I have a printer who was my teacher in 1994, Theo Tremblay, and he prints my work. But the first work, I have to go to his studio and tell him how I want the work, or I I print the first one with him, and he runs off the edition.
The printmaker that Dennis is talking about is a highly skilled printmaker. He built these works are printed on a hydraulic press. Most etchings and linos are done on a traditional roller press. Theo built the press himself, and it's an incredibly technical process. And most artists, or most artist printmakers, well, some of them do their own printmaking, but it's not unusual for it to be done by well, you know, the printmaking, the work that Dennis is doing, it's a collaborative process. It involves the artist and also the printmaker. Oh yeah, very much so. All the documentation that we produce on Dennis' behalf acknowledges the print studio, the actual person that physically did the print.
Yeah, and also he puts his chalk marks on them underneath.
The
got his
mark.
trademark underneath. He stamps it on the paper. Yeah. Yeah. For example, this one here, it takes me 1.5 months or 2 months, and I spend like 2 hours, like 3 days in the week, and 2 hours a day on the work. And sometimes when when I feel like it, like sometimes I don't feel well. If I don't feel well, I don't want to do any carving because I'm gonna put some bad patterns on there. But when I'm feeling inspired, I get into it, and I usually sit for like 1.5 hours or 2 hours. I sit on the block, and I carve in from different directions, not only in one direction, and then finish it on the other side. I carve a bit there, then I do another section up here and move in until I might finish in the middle, or I might finish down on below.
I've watched Dennis, the progression of the blocks being carved, and he's quite extraordinary in that there's very minimal sketches on the block. Dennis gets into a corner, and I'm constantly amazed how it all comes together. You know, they're perfectly balanced. They're defies explanation, but how the final work comes together.
Before I touch my lino, or I come into some sensitive stories, I talk to them, and they allow me. And even when I'm finished, I thank them. I talk to them, and yeah, that's what I do. We have some communications in the ritual. No, they don't. I don't have any. They don't make me tired or anything. Yes. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, our time's up. Just like to take this opportunity to thank, on behalf of Dennis and myself, to thank the Queensland Art Gallery for giving this opportunity to explain to you a bit about Dennis's art.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.